The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble floors of Aldermore Palace, as Lady Helena Blackwood stood at the grand window, her fingers gripping the heavy velvet curtains. Below in the courtyard, servants rushed about, loading trunks onto carriages, their movements efficient and practiced. But Helena's green eyes weren't following the bustle of departure preparations. They were fixed on the two figures standing near the fountain. Queen Isabella stood there, her golden hair catching the light as she spoke softly to Prince Edmund. The prince, Helena's husband of 15 years, leaned closer to the queen than propriety should allow. Helena's jaw tightened as she watched Isabella place a delicate hand on Edmund's arm, her touch lingering a moment too long. The rage that had been simmering in Helena's chest for months threatened to boil over. She had endured the whispers, the knowing glances from courtiers, the way conversations stopped when she entered a room. But watching them now, so comfortable in their intimacy even as the queen prepared to leave for her sister's wedding in the neighboring kingdom of Ravencrest, was almost more than she could bear. "My lady?" A soft voice interrupted her dark thoughts. Helena turned to see Martha, her loyal lady's maid, standing in the doorway. The older woman's face showed concern, her gray eyes full of understanding. "What is it, Martha?" Helena asked, her voice sharper than intended. "The king requests your presence in the blue drawing room, my lady. He wishes to discuss the household arrangements during the queen's absence." Helena almost laughed at the bitter irony. King Alexander wanted to discuss household arrangements while his wife stood in plain view, practically embracing Helena's husband. The king, 20 years Isabella's senior, seemed willfully blind to what was happening under his own roof. "Tell His Majesty I shall be there shortly," Helena said, smoothing her burgundy silk gown with trembling hands. As Martha departed, Helena took one last look out the window. Edmund was now kissing Isabella's hand, his lips lingering against her skin. The queen's cheeks flushed pink, and she glanced around nervously before whispering something that made Edmund smile. Helena turned away, her mind racing. She had been patient, had played the role of the devoted wife while her husband's affections wandered. But Isabella's impending departure had awakened something desperate in Edmund. She had seen it in the way he looked at the queen during last night's farewell banquet, as if he were a man dying of thirst, and she were the last drop of water in the desert. The blue drawing room was a study in royal elegance, its walls adorned with portraits of past monarchs, their painted eyes seeming to judge the living. King Alexander stood by the fireplace, his tall frame slightly stooped, his once dark hair now silver at the temples. Despite his age, he still cut an imposing figure in his navy military jacket, adorned with medals. "Ah, Helena," he said warmly as she entered and curtsied. "Thank you for coming. Please, sit." Helena settled into one of the blue damask chairs, wondering at the king's purpose. Alexander had always been kind to her, treating her more like a daughter than a subject since she had married Edmund and come to live at court. "I wanted to discuss the running of the household during Isabella's absence," the king began, his voice steady but tired. "As you know, she will be gone for at least 2 months, perhaps 3 if the winter snows delay her return." "Of course, Your Majesty," Helena replied, keeping her tone neutral. "I would like you to take charge of the Queen's duties while she is away," Alexander continued. "The staff respects you, and you have always shown excellent judgment in household matters." Helena's heart raced. This was an unexpected opportunity. As acting mistress of the royal household, she would have authority over the servants, the guest lists, the daily routines of palace life. She could control who had access to whom, when and where meetings took place. "I am honored by your trust, Your Majesty," she said carefully. "I will do my utmost to maintain the standards Her Majesty has set." Alexander smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I know you will, my dear. These are difficult times. The political situation with Ravencrest remains delicate, despite this wedding alliance. I need someone I can rely upon to keep the palace running smoothly while I focus on matters of state. Helena nodded, but she noticed the way the king's gaze drifted to the window, toward the courtyard where his wife was saying her farewells. Did he know? Did he suspect? Or was he, like so many men of power, simply choosing not to see what would complicate his carefully ordered world? "There is one more thing," Alexander said, turning back to her. "Prince Edmund will be leading the Queen's escort to the border. I trust this will not inconvenience you?" The words hit Helena like a physical blow, but she kept her expression serene through sheer force of will. "Not at all, Your Majesty. Edmund's duty is to the crown." "Good," Alexander said, though something in his eyes suggested he knew more than he was saying. "The party leaves within the hour. Perhaps you would like to bid them farewell?" It was not a request. Helena rose and curtsied again. "Of course, Your Majesty." As she left the blue drawing room, Helena's mind was already working. Edmund would be gone for at least a week, perhaps 2 if they traveled slowly. 2 weeks alone with Isabella on the road, away from the watching eyes of court. The thought made her stomach churn with fury and fear. In the courtyard, the departure preparations had reached a fever pitch. The Queen's carriage, a magnificent creation of gold and white, with the royal arms emblazoned on the doors, stood ready. Isabella was now surrounded by her ladies-in-waiting, accepting their tearful farewells with grace. Helena approached slowly, each step measured and deliberate. She would not give anyone the satisfaction of seeing her distress. As she drew near, Isabella noticed her and smiled, though the expression seemed forced. "Lady Helena," the Queen said, her voice like honey over broken glass. "How kind of you to see us off." "I wouldn't miss it, Your Majesty," Helena replied, sinking into a perfect curtsy. "I pray for your safe journey and swift return." Isabella's blue eyes searched Helena's face, looking for something. Sarcasm? Threat? But Helena had spent years perfecting her court mask, and she gave away nothing. "You are very kind," Isabella said softly. "I trust you will take good care of things in my absence." "His Majesty has honored me with that responsibility," Helena confirmed. "I shall guard the household's interests as if they were my own." Something flickered in Isabella's eyes at those words, a flash of uncertainty, or perhaps fear. Good, Helena thought. Let her wonder. Let her spend her journey worrying about what might be happening at home while she was away. Edmund appeared then, resplendent in his traveling clothes, his dark hair gleaming in the morning sun. He bowed to both women, his expression carefully neutral, though Helena saw the way his eyes lingered on Isabella. "My lady wife," he said formally, "I shall return as soon as my duty is discharged." "I have no doubt of it," Helena replied, her voice carrying an edge sharp enough to cut. "Do travel safely, my lord. The roads can be so treacherous this time of year, so many unexpected dangers." Edmund's eyes narrowed slightly, but before he could respond, the captain of the guard announced that all was ready for departure. As Isabella was helped into her carriage by Edmund's steady hand, Helena noticed the small, secret smile they shared. It was the smile of conspirators, of lovers who believed they had fooled the world. But Helena saw everything, remembered everything. And in the weeks to come, while they were away, she would have time to plan. The carriage began to roll, followed by the mounted guards and the wagons carrying luggage and supplies. Helena stood in the courtyard long after the procession had disappeared through the palace gates, her mind already turning over possibilities. "My lady?" It was Martha again, appearing at her elbow with a warm cloak. "The morning grows cold." Helena allowed the older woman to drape the cloak around her shoulders. "Tell me, Martha," she said quietly, What do the servants say about the Queen's sudden desire to attend her sister's wedding? She has shown little interest in her family these past 5 years. Martha hesitated, then spoke carefully. There is talk, my lady. Some say the Queen was reluctant to go until she learned who would command her escort. I see, Helena murmured. And what else do they say? That the Queen's chambers have been perfumed more often of late, that she has ordered new gowns in colors that complement darker complexions, that she has been seen walking in the gardens at unusual hours. Helena nodded slowly. The servants always knew. They saw everything, heard everything, and their gossip was often more accurate than any spy's report. Martha, she said decisively, I want you to select the most trustworthy servants to attend to the Queen's chambers while she is away. They are to clean everything thoroughly and report anything unusual they might find. Yes, my lady, Martha said, understanding perfectly. As they walked back into the palace, Helena's mind was already working through the possibilities. She had 2 weeks, perhaps 3, to solidify her position and prepare for whatever would come when Edmund returned. The king had given her authority over the household, and she intended to use it. That evening, as darkness fell over Aldermore Palace, Helena stood in her own chambers, staring at the empty space beside her in the ornate bed she had shared with Edmund for so many years. How many nights had he lain there, thinking of Isabella? How many times had he compared Helena's dark hair to Isabella's golden locks, her green eyes to Isabella's blue ones? 3 days after the Queen's departure, Helena had transformed the palace into her own domain. She moved through the halls with new authority, her burgundy and black gowns sweeping across the floors as servants scurried to fulfill her commands. The household staff, sensing the shift in power, quickly aligned themselves with the new order. In the Queen's private study, Helena sat behind the ornate desk, reviewing correspondence that would normally never pass through her hands. Letters from nobles seeking favor, invitations to social events, requests for royal patronage, all now required her approval. It was intoxicating, this taste of real power. But Helena reminded herself that it was merely a tool for her true purpose. My lady, a young maid named Sarah entered after knocking. We've finished the inventory of Her Majesty's chambers as you requested. Helena looked up sharply. She had ordered a complete cataloging of Isabella's possessions under the guise of protecting them during the Queen's absence. And? Sarah shifted nervously. We found some items that were unexpected, my lady. She held out a small wooden box, her hands trembling slightly. Helena took the box and opened it. Inside were letters tied with a blue ribbon. Her heart began to race as she recognized Edmund's handwriting. With steady hands that belied her inner turmoil, she untied the ribbon and began to read. My beloved Isabella, the first letter began. Every moment apart from you is agony. When you smiled at me during the harvest feast, I thought my heart would burst from my chest. Helena read through letter after letter, each one more passionate than the last. They spoke of secret meetings in the rose garden, of stolen kisses in shadowed alcoves, of a love that would defy all convention. The most recent was dated just 2 days before the Queen's departure. My darling, these 2 weeks we shall have together on the road will be paradise, away from watching eyes, away from the suffocating propriety of court. We can finally be free to express our love. I count the hours until we depart. Helena set the letters down carefully, her mind crystal clear despite the pain that threatened to overwhelm her. Sarah, she said calmly, who else knows of this discovery? Only myself and Martha, my lady, Sarah replied quickly. Martha said we should bring them directly to you. Good. You will speak of this to no one. Do you understand? Yes, my lady. After dismissing Sarah, Helena sat alone with the evidence of her husband's betrayal. Part of her wanted to burn the letters, to destroy the proof of what she had long suspected. But another part, the part that had been sharpened by years of court intrigue, saw opportunity. That night, she summoned Martha to her chambers. The older woman arrived promptly, her face grave. "You've read them?" Martha asked without preamble. "Every word," Helena confirmed. "Tell me, Martha, what other secrets have the servants uncovered?" Martha took a deep breath. "There's talk from the stable boys. They say Prince Edmund has been making arrangements to purchase an estate in the countryside, somewhere remote. They overheard him speaking to his steward about it." Helena's eyes narrowed. An estate away from court could mean only one thing, a place where Edmund and Isabella could meet without fear of discovery, or perhaps something more permanent. Perhaps Edmund was planning to leave her entirely. "There's more, my lady," Martha continued reluctantly. "One of the Queen's ladies-in-waiting, Lady Catherine, has been acting strangely since the departure. She seems nervous, always looking over her shoulder. I believe she may have been helping to facilitate the meetings." Helena stood and walked to the window, looking out at the same courtyard where she had watched them say farewell. "Bring Lady Catherine to me tomorrow. Tell her I wish to discuss the Queen's wardrobe inventory. Make sure she comes alone." The next morning, Lady Catherine arrived at Helena's chambers, her pretty face pale with anxiety. She was young, perhaps 20, with auburn hair and frightened brown eyes. Helena had always thought her weak, the type who could be easily manipulated. "Please sit," Helena said pleasantly, gesturing to a chair. "Would you care for some tea?" "Thank you, my lady," Catherine said nervously, accepting the cup with shaking hands. Helena let the silence stretch, watching as Catherine grew more uncomfortable. Finally, she spoke. "I've been reviewing the Queen's correspondence, Lady Catherine. Such interesting reading." Catherine's teacup rattled against its saucer. I don't understand, my lady." "Don't you?" Helena's voice remained gentle, but her eyes were hard as emeralds. "I think you understand perfectly. You've been carrying messages between them, haven't you? Arranging their secret meetings?" "I don't know what you mean," Catherine whispered, but tears were already forming in her eyes. Helena leaned forward. "Let me be very clear, Lady Catherine. I have evidence that could destroy several reputations, including yours. Your family's standing at court, your future marriage prospects, everything you hold dear, all of it hangs by a thread." Catherine began to sob quietly. She commanded me. I had no choice." "There is always a choice," Helena said coldly, "and now you have another one to make. You can continue to serve Isabella's interests and face the consequences when this scandal breaks, or you can serve mine and be protected." What would you have me do?" Catherine asked miserably. "For now, nothing. Continue as normal when the Queen returns. But you will report to me. Everything she says, everyone she meets, every letter she sends or receives, you will be my eyes and ears." Catherine nodded, defeated. "Yes, my lady." After dismissing the frightened young woman, Helena felt a grim satisfaction. She was building a network, piece by piece. But she needed more than servants and frightened ladies-in-waiting. She needed allies with real power. That afternoon, she paid a visit to Lord Chancellor Blackwood, no relation despite their shared surname. The Chancellor was a shrewd old politician who had survived 3 kings through careful maneuvering and an uncanny ability to sense which way the wind was blowing. "Lady Helena," he greeted her in his study, his sharp gray eyes assessing, "to what do I owe this unexpected pleasure?" "I thought it was time we had a frank discussion, Lord Chancellor," Helena said, settling into a chair across from his desk. "About the future of the kingdom." "Indeed?" His bushy eyebrows rose. "And what concerns you about our future?" Helena chose her words carefully. "The king is not a young man. The Queen has yet to produce an heir. And there are..." Complications in the royal marriage that could affect the succession. The chancellor leaned back, steepling his fingers. You speak in riddles, my lady. Then let me be plain, Helena said. If the queen were to bear a child, could we be certain of its parentage? The words hung in the air like a drawn blade. The chancellor's expression didn't change, but Helena saw the calculating look in his eyes. That is a very serious allegation, he said slowly. It's not an allegation. It's a question, one that others might ask if certain friendships were to become public knowledge. And do you have reason to believe such friendships exist? Helena smiled coolly. I am temporarily overseeing the royal household, Lord Chancellor. I see many things. They regarded each other in silence for a long moment. Finally, the Chancellor spoke. What is it you want, Lady Helena? I want to protect the kingdom from scandal, she replied. I want to ensure that the succession remains clear and undisputed, and I want to safeguard my own position and that of my family. Admirable goals, the Chancellor murmured. And how do you propose to achieve them? That depends on what happens when the Queen returns, Helena said. But I believe it would be wise to have contingency plans in place, don't you? The Chancellor nodded slowly. I have always believed in being prepared for all eventualities. Perhaps we should speak again soon. As Helena left the Chancellor's residence, she felt the pieces of her plan clicking into place. She had evidence, she had spies, and now she had the beginning of political support. But she needed one more thing, leverage over Edmund himself. That evening, she visited Edmund's private study, a room she rarely entered. It smelled of leather and his distinctive cologne, and for a moment, Helena was overwhelmed by memories of happier times, when she had believed in their marriage, in his love for her. She pushed such thoughts aside and began her search. Edmund was meticulous in his record-keeping, and she soon found what she was looking for, financial documents relating to the estate Martha had mentioned. But what she discovered went beyond her expectations. Edmund wasn't just planning to purchase an estate. He was systematically moving funds, liquidating investments, converting holdings to gold. The amounts were staggering. This wasn't preparation for maintaining a love nest. This was preparation for flight. Among the papers, she found a half-finished letter in Edmund's hand. My darling, our plan proceeds well. By spring, we shall be free of this suffocating court and all its hypocrisies. A new life awaits us in Cordonia, where your cousin has promised us sanctuary. I know the sacrifice you make in leaving your position, but surely our love is worth a throne. Helena sank into Edmund's chair, the letter trembling in her hands. They were planning to elope, to abandon everything, their positions, their responsibilities, their marriages, and flee to a foreign court. The scandal would be enormous. It would humiliate the king, destabilize the kingdom, and leave Helena as an abandoned wife, an object of pity and ridicule. But now she knew, and knowledge was power. Over the following days, Helena worked tirelessly. She had the household guards quietly increased, citing concerns about security in the Queen's absence. She had the palace gates more closely monitored, with orders to report all comings and goings directly to her. She cultivated relationships with key nobles, dropping subtle hints about the need for stability in uncertain times. She also made a point of spending more time with King Alexander. The old monarch seemed to appreciate her company, especially during the long evenings when the palace felt empty without its queen. You have been a great comfort to me, Helena, Alexander said one night as they played chess in his private parlor. I confess the palace seems very quiet without Isabella's laughter. Helena moved her bishop carefully. She will return soon, Your Majesty, and I'm sure she will have many stories to tell of her sister's wedding. Yes, Alexander said absently, studying the board. Though I wonder... He trailed off, and Helena waited patiently. Finally, he continued, I wonder if she was happy to go. She seemed reluctant when the invitation first arrived, but then suddenly she was eager to depart. Perhaps she simply needed time to prepare herself for the journey, Helena suggested diplomatically. Alexander made his move, taking one of her pawns. Perhaps. Tell me, Helena, do you think Edmund is happy? He has seemed distracted lately. Helena's hand hesitated over her knight. I believe Edmund is devoted to his duty, Your Majesty. Duty, Alexander repeated softly. Yes, we must all do our duty, even when it conflicts with our heart's desires. Their eyes met across the chessboard, and Helena saw in that moment that the king knew more than he let on. But like her, he was choosing his moment, gathering his strength for whatever storm was coming. The morning of the Queen's expected return dawned gray and cold, with storm clouds gathering on the horizon. Helena stood in the great hall, overseeing the final preparations for the welcome feast. Every detail had been planned meticulously, from the placement of the guards to the selection of wines, but this was no ordinary celebration. My lady, Martha appeared at her elbow, speaking quietly. The watchtower has spotted the royal procession. They'll arrive within the hour. Helena nodded, her face calm despite the churning in her stomach. Is everything in place? Yes, my lady. Lord Chancellor Blackwood awaits in the blue drawing room with the others. Lady Catherine is prepared to play her part, and the king will do what he must, Helena finished. He always has. As the sound of hoofbeats echoed in the courtyard, Helena positioned herself at the bottom of the grand staircase, the perfect picture of a dutiful wife awaiting her husband's return. Servants lined up behind her, and nobles began to gather, drawn by curiosity and the scent of impending drama. The great doors swung open, and Queen Isabella entered, her traveling cloak dusty from the road, but her bearing still regal. Behind her came Edmund, his dark eyes scanning the crowd until they found Helena. She saw the flash of guilt in them before he composed his features into a mask of husbandly courtesy. My lord husband, Helena said with a deep curtsy. Welcome home. My lady, Edmund replied stiffly, bowing. You look well. As do you, Helena said, her smile sharp as a blade. Travel seems to agree with you. Both of you. Isabella's eyes darted between them nervously. Lady Helena, we are grateful for your stewardship of the household. I trust all has been well? Remarkably well, Your Majesty, Helena replied, though there have been some interesting developments in your absence. The king awaits you in the blue drawing room. He is most anxious to speak with you. Both of you. The color drained from Isabella's face. Edmund stepped forward, his jaw tight. Perhaps the queen should rest first. The king was quite insistent, Helena interrupted smoothly. He said it concerned a matter of utmost urgency regarding the kingdom's future. There was no refusing a royal summons. As Isabella and Edmund made their way to the blue drawing room, Helena followed at a discreet distance. The other nobles, sensing something momentous, trailed behind like sharks scenting blood in the water. The blue drawing room had been transformed into something resembling a court of law. King Alexander sat in a high-backed chair, his face grave and aged beyond his years. Beside him stood Lord Chancellor Blackwood, holding a leather portfolio. Other members of the Privy Council were arranged in a semicircle, their expressions somber. Isabella, Alexander said, his voice heavy with sorrow. Edmund, please stand before me. The queen and the prince exchanged alarmed glances but obeyed. Helena took her place among the nobles, her heart pounding with anticipation and dread. It has come to my attention, the king began slowly, that there have been certain irregularities in the conduct of members of my household. Irregularities that threaten the very foundation of our kingdom. Your Majesty, Isabella began, her voice trembling. I don't understand. Don't you? Alexander's voice grew harder. Lord Chancellor, Please present the evidence. The Chancellor stepped forward, opening his portfolio. We have here letters, written in Prince Edmund's hand to Her Majesty the Queen, letters that speak of an illicit relationship and plans to abandon their lawful marriages and flee the kingdom. Gasps echoed through the room. Edmund's face had gone pale as parchment. Those are private correspondence. Nothing is private when it threatens the crown, the Chancellor interrupted coldly. We also have testimony from Lady Catherine regarding secret meetings facilitated between the parties, and financial records showing Prince Edmund's preparation to liquidate his holdings and transfer funds abroad. Isabella swayed on her feet, and for a moment Helena thought she might faint. But the Queen straightened, lifting her chin with desperate dignity. Alexander, please let me explain. Explain what? The King asked, rising to his feet. Explain how you betrayed your marriage vows, how you plotted to humiliate me before all of Europe, how you planned to abandon your duties and flee like common criminals. We fell in love, Edmund burst out, stepping protectively in front of Isabella. Is that such a crime? You forced her into a marriage with a man old enough to be her father. Silence, Alexander roared, his face flushing with rage. You dare speak to me of force? You who took an oath of loyalty to the crown? Who married Lady Helena before God and man? You speak of love as if it excuses all sins. Helena watched the scene unfold with a mixture of satisfaction and unexpected pain. Seeing Edmund defend Isabella so passionately, seeing the tears streaming down the Queen's face, she felt the last remnants of her love for her husband crumble to ash. Your Majesty, Lord Chancellor Blackwood interjected, the law is clear in such matters. Adultery against the crown is high treason. The penalties— I know the penalties, Alexander said quietly, suddenly looking every one of his 60 years. He turned to Isabella, and his voice was filled with profound disappointment. Did you ever care for me at all? Or was I always just a crown to you? Isabella's composure finally broke. I tried, she sobbed. I tried to be a good wife, to do my duty. But I was so young when we married, and Edmund, he made me feel alive in a way I never had before. And so you chose feeling alive over honor, Alexander said bitterly. You chose passion over duty, knowing the cost. The king turned his attention to Edmund. And you were like a son to me. I trusted you with my armies, my secrets, my wife's protection. This is how you repay that trust? Edmund's defiance crumbled under the weight of the king's disappointment. Your Majesty, I never meant for it to happen. But love is not something one can control. No, Alexander agreed. But one can control one's actions. And your actions have consequences. The king returned to his chair, suddenly looking frail. I could have you both executed for treason. It would be within my rights. And many would say justice. Isabella let out a small cry of terror, and Edmund moved closer to her. Helena watched them cling to each other and felt hollow inside. Even now, facing death, they turned to each other rather than to their lawful spouses. However, Alexander continued, I am not a cruel man, despite what you may think. And executing the Queen would cause a diplomatic crisis with Ravencrest that our kingdom can ill afford. He paused, letting the weight of his next words settle over the room. Therefore, I offer you a choice. The room held its breath. Isabella, you will retire to the convent of St. Morgana, where you will spend the rest of your days in prayer and contemplation. The marriage will not be dissolved. You will remain queen in name only, ensuring no succession crisis. But you will never again set foot in this palace or any royal residence. Isabella's face was white as snow, but she nodded slowly. Edmund, the king continued, you will accept exile. You will leave this kingdom within 3 days and never return. Your lands and titles will be stripped from you, though I will allow you to take enough gold to establish yourself abroad. a mercy you do not deserve." "And if we refuse?" Edmund asked, though his voice lacked any real defiance. "Then you will both be tried for treason, and I will not intervene in the court's judgment," Alexander said simply. Helena stepped forward then, surprising herself. "Your Majesty, if I may speak?" Alexander looked at her with something like pity. "You have suffered most in this, Lady Helena. What would you say?" Helena looked at her husband, soon-to-be former husband, and felt years of anger and pain crystallize into cold clarity. "I would say that Prince Edmund has made his choice clear. He chose her over me, over his vows, over his honor. I ask only that I be granted a divorce, so that I might salvage what remains of my dignity." "Granted," Alexander said immediately. "You will also retain all of Edmund's properties within the kingdom, as compensation for your suffering." Edmund started to protest, but Isabella touched his arm, silencing him. They had lost. Everyone in the room knew it. "Do you accept these terms?" the king asked. "I accept," Isabella whispered. "I accept," Edmund echoed, his voice hollow. "Then it is done," Alexander said. "Guards, escort the queen to her chambers to prepare for her journey to St. Morgana. Prince Edmund, you have 3 days to arrange your affairs. You are both forbidden from seeing or communicating with each other again." As the guards moved forward, Edmund and Isabella shared one last, desperate look. Then Isabella was led away, her ladies-in-waiting, including the terrified Lady Catherine, trailing behind her. Edmund turned to Helena, his eyes pleading. "Helena, Save your words," Helena said coldly. "You made your choice long ago. Live with it." She turned and swept from the room, her head held high. Behind her, she heard Edmund's broken voice asking the king for permission to withdraw, and Alexander's weary agreement. That night, as rain lashed against the palace windows, Helena stood in her chambers alone now, no longer shared with a faithless husband. Martha helped her out of her court dress, her movements gentle and motherly. "You played a dangerous game, my lady," Martha said softly. "Did I?" Helena asked, meeting her own reflection in the mirror. "I merely brought truth to light. They condemned themselves with their own actions." "Still," Martha persisted, "to orchestrate such a downfall. There will be those who fear you now." Helena smiled grimly. "Good. Fear is better than pity, and respect better than both." She paused, then added more quietly, "I loved him once, Martha. Did you know that? When we first married, I thought Edmund hung the moon and stars." "I know, my lady," Martha said gently, "but he proved unworthy of that love." "Yes," Helena agreed, "he did." A knock at the door interrupted them. A page entered, bowing low. "My lady, His Majesty requests your presence in his private study." Helena found King Alexander alone, staring into the fireplace with a glass of wine in his hand. He looked older than she had ever seen him, the weight of the day's events etched into every line of his face. "Your Majesty," she said, curtsying. "Sit, Helena," he said tiredly. "We are beyond formality now, you and I." She sat across from him, waiting. "You knew," he said finally. "You knew what would happen when you gave me those letters, presented that evidence. You orchestrated every moment of that confrontation." It wasn't a question, but Helena answered anyway. "I protected the kingdom from scandal, Your Majesty, as I promised Lord Chancellor Blackwood I would." Alexander laughed bitterly. "Scandal. We have avoided international scandal by creating a domestic one. The queen in a convent, my cousin in exile, and my kingdom wondering if their king is a cuckolded fool." "You are no fool, Your Majesty," Helena said firmly. "You are a king who chose stability over sentiment, duty over personal feeling. History will remember you as wise, not weak." Will it? Alexander studied her with tired eyes. And what of you, Helena? You have your revenge, your former husband's properties, your dignity intact. Was it worth it? Helena considered the question honestly. Ask me in a year, Your Majesty, when the wounds are less fresh, and I can think of Edmund without wanting to weep or rage. At least you are honest, Alexander said. He set down his wine glass and leaned back in his chair. I have a proposition for you, Helena. With Isabella gone, I need someone to fulfill the duties of queen in all but name. Someone with intelligence, strength, and a proven ability to navigate court politics. Will you accept the position of First Lady of the court? Helena's breath caught. It was more than she had dared hope for. A position of real power and influence, second only to the king himself. I would be honored, Your Majesty, she said carefully. Good, Alexander said. We will make the announcement after Edmund's departure. Let him slink away in the shadow of his disgrace first. 3 days later, Helena stood once more at the palace windows, watching as a lone carriage made its way through the gates. Edmund was leaving, bound for exile in a foreign land, where his charm and good looks might win him a new life, though never again the position he had thrown away. She had not spoken to him again after the confrontation, though he had tried repeatedly to see her. What was there to say? He had made his choice, and she had made hers. As the carriage disappeared into the distance, Helena felt something inside her finally break free. Not her heart, which had shattered long ago, but the chains of her old life. She was no longer the betrayed wife, the woman in the shadows of a faithless husband. She was Lady Helena Blackwood, First Lady of the court, architect of her own destiny. Behind her, the palace hummed with activity. There was work to be done, a kingdom to help govern, a future to build from the ashes of the past. And somewhere in a distant convent, a golden-haired queen would spend her days in prayer, contemplating the price of following one's heart instead of one's duty. Helena turned from the window, her burgundy silk gown rustling as she moved. She had chosen duty, chosen power, chosen survival over the destructive beauty of passionate love. And as she walked through the halls of Aldermore Palace, servants bowing as she passed, she knew she had chosen wisely. The storm had passed, leaving destruction in its wake. But Helena had not merely survived it, she had harnessed it, directed it, and emerged stronger than before. If that made her cold, calculating, even cruel in the eyes of some, so be it. She was done being anyone's victim. From now on, she would be the one who shaped destinies, who held power, who decided fates. And if her bed was cold and her heart was empty, at least her head would wear an invisible crown of her own making. In the end, Helena reflected as she entered the throne room to take her place at the king's right hand. Perhaps that was the only kind of crown worth having, the one you claimed for yourself through strength, intelligence, and an unflinching willingness to do what must be done. The fairy tale was over. Real life, with all its harsh truths and bitter triumphs, had begun.